When we talk about batteries, it's important to think about what they are made of. At the heart, the two most important components are the cathode and the anode. Simply put, the cathode is where the energy is stored, and the anode is where it's released. Together, they are the muscle of the battery. In terms of cost, the cathode makes up almost 25 to 40% of the bill of materials of a lithium-ion cell, and the anode makes up another 10 to 15%. You add in the separator, electrolyte, and the casing, and you have a battery. So, as an investor, the question is, where does one play? In a simplified battery supply chain, there is mining at the start for minerals like lithium, nickel, and cobalt. Then comes refining, followed by active materials like cathode and anode, which is midstream processing. And finally, the assembly of cell and battery packs. India doesn't have large proven reserves of lithium or cobalt. So competing in mining is not an option for us. What we can do is invest in the midstream space, converting raw materials into cathode and anode active material. This is where low-cost chemical processing, where India has an inherent advantage, access to technology, capital and scale matters, not just who has the reserves in the ground.
Think of it like the solar value chain that India has localized recently. China controlled 95% of the solar processing globally in 2018, while India had only 3 gigawatt back then. Through policy pushes like basic customs duty, ALMM approved list and PLI schemes, India has achieved remarkable results. Our solar module processing is expected to cross 150 gigawatt and cell capacity is expected to cross 75 gigawatt by 2028, translating into an annual profit pool of almost $3 billion for the industry. This has already led to new market cap creation of $15 billion in the last 5 years, which could double to $30 billion in the next 5 years. Batteries present a similar path for us. If we focus on the right part of the chain, midstream and cell manufacturing, we can still capture a significant share of this value. India is looking at around 130 gigawatt hours of domestic cell manufacturing by 2030, which will need $12 to $14 billion in capex across the value chain. This is split in the following way. Around $8 to $9 billion are needed just for the downstream, which is cell and pack manufacturing, where players like Ola Electric, Reliance, Exide, Amara Raja and JSW Energy are active. Then there's the midstream opportunity, materials like cathode, anode, electrolyte and separator, which would require another $5 billion. Singularity portfolios, HEG and Loham are operating here, along with other companies like Gujarat Fluoro, Epsilon Carbon, Himadri Chemicals, Neogen and Altman. Some of these companies like Epsilon and Gujarat Fluoro are even setting up capacities in the US. Within this, margins in battery pack assembly are thin, like making solar modules. But lithium-ion cell manufacturing is highly capex intensive and low ROCE. But in the midstream processing, such as cathode and anode materials, there could be real differentiation and pricing power. The midstream space has the potential to deliver almost $1 billion in annual profit and create almost $20 billion market cap by 2030 on a capex investment of $4 billion. So in short, midstream is where we believe the profit pools lie. And India has a window to build a strategic position here. But it will need right mix of capital, technology partnerships, and policy to make it happen.
India's opportunity in midstream materials mirrors the kind of foundation China built years ago. To understand how India can replicate that scale and integration, it's worth looking at how China shaped its battery strategy from the ground up.
Then I would say the government also, at the starting point, give a lot of incentives for the local battery companies. I think in 2015 also, right, at that time we have the whitelist. That means if a customer buy a EV in China, you have to buy an EV equipped with certain battery produced locally to enjoy that credit. Right, so that actually helped local battery company really get market share in the beginning time, right? One side is real money, the other side is the commitment to show to everybody it has to work, And then the second step is that once you have that support, competition force everybody to compete, to build larger capacity, and to have alliances with OEM to secure volume, secure supply, and eventually making the whole supply chain an ecosystem for the China as a competitive advantage going forward.
Just as the Chinese government led the development of a battery ecosystem, India needs comparable support for cell assembly and midstream processing. Without this, even building cell gigafactories won't prevent dependency on imports. Incentives like the PLI scheme for cells are a start. The Indian government has awarded almost 40 gigawatt hours of capacity to players such as Ola and Reliance. Even though none of the players have benefited from this yet, we expect the government to review the scheme and reallocate the rupees 18,000 crores or roughly $2 billion worth of these incentives targeted under the scheme. Then we have the National Critical Minerals Mission, which has earmarked almost 16,300 crores for self-reliance in the critical mineral sector. Allocation within this will be towards domestic reserves exploration, foreign sourcing and collaboration, critical minerals processing and recycling. This investment is particularly important as we hold 6% of global critical mineral reserves, but produce just 0.5% of the global output due to lack of processing capacities. The Government of India has recently also launched a research, development and innovation scheme of rupees 1 lakh crore or roughly $12 billion. This is to encourage the private sector to scale up R&D in various sunrise sectors, with energy transition being one of the primary target sectors in this. While these initiatives will play a huge role in shaping the future of battery in India, there is also a need to implement basic customs duty. Similar to the 40% and 25% basic customs duty on solar modules and cells, we need a policy push in batteries and battery materials as well. The idea is to encourage domestic investment and ensure greater cost parity versus China. For example, in the case of cell assembly, as per our calculations, a BCD of at least 25 to 30% is needed to make these projects viable in India. The principle is simple. Without tariff protection, it will be very hard for Indian manufacturers to compete with heavily scaled Chinese players. With such support, we can kickstart a robust domestic ecosystem.
Along with these initiatives, if we have to gain autonomy in energy transition, one very important category is recycling of critical metals, where our portfolio company, Loham, is operating. However, it is important to understand first why recycling is important at all. Do you know that 35% of cost of an electric scooter is just battery metals? These metals, which are cobalt, nickel, lithium, these are concentrated in very select geographies of the world. And a good chunk of these mines are controlled by China, directly or indirectly, and 90% of the final refining of these metals also happens in China. So China has built a very strong foothold over this supply chain over the last 20 years. So if any country like India, it has to build self-reliance over the energy transition, recycling is one of the critical ways of doing that.
As batteries evolve, chemistries will diversify. Currently, LFP dominates mass market and BESS applications, and NMC is primarily used for premium automotive applications. But there's a wave of next-gen chemistries which are on the horizon, sodium-ion and solid-state to be in particular. We believe multiple technologies can and will coexist depending on the various use cases. The evolution of sodium-ion battery, particularly for low-cost and safety-critical applications, will be an interesting development. Each battery technology will likely carve out its own niche. But similar to the decades it took for the lithium-ion ecosystem to mature, other technologies like solid-state and sodium-ion are likely to take 5 to 10 years to challenge lithium-ion's dominance. But chemistry isn't the only story. Geopolitics will shape the winners. China's growing interest in global joint ventures could open up access to critical technologies and know-how that India needs. They want market access and low-cost processing, and we need technology and capital. It's a win-win if structured right. Building cell gigafactories is only one part of India's battery story. But without control over minerals, processing, and recycling, our clean energy ambitions remain exposed to global geopolitical risks. At Singularity, we believe India's long-term resilience will come from building this full ecosystem at home. That means investing in supply chains and core technologies right now. This will be a long journey, and the earlier we start, the better our chances of success. Just as oil built the energy giants of the 20th century and silicon built the digital giants of the 21st century, batteries and critical minerals will define the winners of the next wave. The critical question is, will India just buy this future or will we build it?